The major meltdown when one faces the truth. My wife and I have been together for 15 years, married for 9. We met when we were in our early 20s. Our relationship was always great, we were very open and honest, no infidelity, we had great communication and so much love for each other. There have been rough times too, for sure. Financial problems were always there, but we kept smiling and went to bed in each other's arms every night. For reasons I won't go into here, last year we both started suffering from depression. I didn't cope with it very well, left my rather awful job and was miserable. She started seeing a therapist and taking an antidepressant. After a while she told me she wants to leave, but we discussed it and agreed to see AMC. I recovered from my depression and was getting back on track, but she was already gone mentally at that stage. We've been to 4 to 5 sessions until 3 weeks ago she just walked out the door in tears after she saw to it that we have a beautiful last day together, which I thought was kind of brutal. In that time frame she has changed substantially and is experiencing what I call a midlife crisis for a lack of a better term. She is going out more, meeting new people, has a lot of new girlfriends, suddenly interested in every silly activity or idea and just generally acting very weird, posting random photos on FB etc. We had a very close relationship. We were together a lot because we both worked from home very often, and I might have been a rather needy husband emotionally. I admit, she feels that this symbiosis was harmful for both of us, leading to us not fulfilling our individual potentials. Now that I'm on the outside I can see this was probably true, although I feel this is a problem we can solve now that it's out in the open. Since she left, we have had several conversations and even met a few times. I've done the required soul searching and I think I have a good understanding of what she is going through and where I failed. I listen to her and try to be as compassionate as I can. I'm also obviously dead serious about working on my own problems and facing the issues that come up in this process. She cries a lot when we talk, doesn't shy away from hugging me, kissing me, holding my hand. She says she loves me and doesn't want to hurt me, but she can't be with me right now. She needs to be alone, think alone, act alone. When I say I want to give her all the space and time she needs, she gets nervous about me even having hope of reconciling to the point of losing sleep over it. The only thing she agrees to is a separation with no time limit, no mutual commitment to solve problems. Nothing. After a few hours discussing this, she agreed to a 1-month NC separation and seeing our MC afterwards. Although, I know for a fact that she is very pessimistic about our chances and that she does not intend to come back after this month. We speak openly about her needing new accommodation etc. I also see no point in going to the MC if she doesn't want to move forward. She claims there is no other man and I believe her, although I know for a fact she is being a bit flirtatious and curious. Nevertheless, she agreed that for now we both shouldn't be free to see other people, which is good. So here I am. Right now, I know the only thing I can do is work on myself. I need a new job, I need to move forward with my own personal dreams and desires, and hope that she sees my commitment to change and forge a new and improved relationship. The only thing that bothers me is whether or not I am hurting this process by keeping my hopes alive. I would love to hear your thoughts. No kids, no. In fact, this latest episode came about after I started talking more seriously about having kids. I felt it was time and that we needed as a couple, we deserved a love child. But I know that for her, that would have been another thing to worry about. She was always a very responsible person, taking care of her mother, her younger sisters, me in a lot of ways. She needs to break from that. Yeah, that's what I intend to do. We agreed on no contact and I intend to keep this agreement. I have to stress that this whole NC idea was mine to begin with. She just wanted to say goodbye for good. I suggested we try this as it was obvious that by meeting and discussing our relationship every few days was just doing more damage and she obviously needs space right now. I'm keeping this alive, not her. She is already in a different place mentally, that's why I have low hopes. But cheating, plan B etc. No, I really don't think she would do that honestly. Right now, I shall remain focused on my own well-being and get my act together. Well, I am aware of the very slim chances my marriage currently has. I'm also aware that keeping my hope for reconciliation alive means more pain and grief. She is very unstable right now, and I want to give her this space. That's the kind of guy I am and that is who she married. I actually think this is a sign of strength and not a weakness. If after this month I still see no desire to at least start some sort of positive process, I will ask her to start sorting out the final details of us breaking up. My comment: Sir, right now you do not know her motivations. I have seen this a few times over the years. First, I will discount the 2 I knew were having affairs. In both cases, the betrayed partner wreaked havoc on their spouse. One came back after being unceremoniously dumped, thinking that his wife had not tweaked to the affair. Idiotically, he came back to his house to find that she had leased it to another family and she was long gone. She did surface long enough to hit him with the divorce that took him down severely. My advice if you go the divorce route is to avoid the contentious divorce route. Lots of people go down this road with plans of getting even and the lawyers just wind up with everything. However, you're going to treat each other post-divorce. You have a big joint incentive to be reasonable about splitting things up until the divorce is final. Story 2. The Rebounding One. First of all, this is a long post, and I will not apologize for it. It is a rant, truths and wisdom I've been forced upon, and most importantly a look into what infidelity leaves behind in the long term. Any questions I ask here will be rhetorical. I am not looking for advice. I want to shine a light of warning on what infidelity does, and what people who try to reconcile can expect. Please use this as an example of what reconciliation can be like. I've been married for over 19 years, only about 10 of those worth experiencing. Warning, I am jaded, but I'll try to play nice. 9 years ago, I got into wife's Facebook on suspicion that something was going on, and I was not prepared for what I found. More on this later. To be clear on my participation, I usually advocate divorce and full truth exposure. If you can reconcile knowing your spouse was having mind-blowing affair with Karen the sitter or Toby the childhood friend on your bed while sharing the most intimate details of your faults, misgivings, and their hearts post-coitus, then more power to you. But you do deserve to know how your marriage was violated so you can make an informed and intelligent decision. The so-called gory details do have a time and place, but I believe ultimately withholding them is really just further disrespect, rug sweeping, and a violation of trust than any real help to the relationship. I've even seen so-called experts suggest that these details provide no real help to a relationship. No crap. Who would have guessed that fooling around with somebody who you're not married to would provide bad, and therefore destructive, news for the relationship? Yeah, learn something new every day. Just because the truth hurts don't mean it's not what is needed though. Maybe this thinking that a betrayed spouse can't handle the hard info is argument that we should be focusing more on prevention of the destructive influence of extramarital visitors than arguing that a couple who wants to stay together should do so at such incredible cost. I mean, if we can't handle the truth of how exactly our marriage was ruined, then we have bigger problems with this infidelity thing than we like to admit. Besides, wasn't it lies and partial truths that got most of us here in the first place? But I digress. On a related note, I did watch a video by a seemingly remorseful wayward recently, and I also saw some unproductive posts directed at her. She is down. She's taken her licks. Is it our duty to enforce excessive justice upon her, or is it to help her find her way through a hard time? The sad thing to me is that I agree philosophically with those of you who attacked her in your frustration. I get how you feel. I have intimate knowledge of how you feel. I can't see an adulterous wife, even just on TV, and not want to bash every OM with a dose of their own medicine, or was that a baseball bat? Note, I'm not advocating violence, but I won't lie about how I feel, and then send the WW packing back to their stupid AP if he's so wonderful that you want to ruin your marriage permanently, then you deserve each other. Wanting something doesn't make it right though. Our spouses wanted something, and now we're all here finger-banging our keyboards in the hope that maybe we can find some relief in our incredible pain. Well, I am anyways. On professionals. I don't much care for professional therapists, or any other name you want to give them. I think they can and do help at times, but they also have some glaring deficiencies. They often have very narrow views of what infidelity really does to a relationship, making them inadequate to the task. Or they favor one spouse over the other. Or they want to talk about other problems in the marriage as if the affair resulted from some fault of the betrayed or the marriage itself, and not simply the crap choices of the wayward. All marriages are imperfect, yet not all are plagued by infidelity. Talking about what the betrayed did to contribute, they love that word, to the affair holds about as much wisdom as talking to grieving parents about child safety after their child died by running into traffic. Does this kind of information help? Sure, it may help prevent future problems, but what is being done to actually address the problem of what happened? Infidelity is less symptom than it is problem. I can handle pretty much any problem thrown at me that people use as an excuse for infidelity, and I'm sure most of you would too. Actual infidelity though. Rub that crap in, and it won't wash out so easy. Back to my story. 9 years ago, I felt something was wrong in my marriage, so I hacked my wife's Facebook. I knew if something was up, there'd be evidence there. She spent considerable amounts of time there. I still hate that site, you know. It has been used to destroy so many people. Anyhow, I found messages between her and an old friend we'll call Richard. Richard was one of my wife's old crushes from her teen years. He moved into her neighborhood as a 20-year-old and struck up what I would consider was a very odd relationship with a 15-year-old girl. He suddenly moved on after a while in the neighborhood. Nobody has ever told me why. Fast forward 3 years and I come into the picture. I met my wife through my sister. They danced on the high school drill team together, and I was infatuated with my sister's friend. Little did I know she liked me back. Long story short, we start dating and eventually get married. During dating I learn about Richard, and I do not like him right off the bat. She kept pictures, and even a pea coat he left behind in his hasty retreat from the neighborhood. I felt something was off in my mind, but I was young and wrote it off as a logical jealousy. Nothing more. Everybody has their past, and is entitled to it right. 10 years of what I would consider blissful marriage passed, and the cursed peacoat followed us as we moved into an apartment, then 3 different houses. In this third house, the world came crashing down upon us. I was working swing shifts during this time. She was working for a doctor's office during the day, and we don't see much of each other. And who decides to make a return into my wife's life? Richard, recently divorced and reeling from some time in wife's mouth. This gem of a person decides it's time to rekindle his relationship with my wife. He reaches out to her, and she responds. He's alone and needs my help. Nobody else is helping him, she rationalizes. Sure, he dealt illegal drugs and ran a failing barber shop. What could go wrong? He certainly wouldn't try anything inappropriate or take our money. He was trying to turn his life around. Right. I think I should get in front of this. I'll tell her I'm uncomfortable with him, and that she's fine to have him for a friend, but that I don't trust his intentions. I told her my thoughts. I didn't like him being around even as a friend, and I asked her to never ever spend time alone with him or hide conversations with him, or our marriage would most certainly suffer. Problem solved, right? Well, the messages I found on Facebook told a different story. They weren't explicit and full of detail, but they did mention how my wife shouldn't have gotten out of his bed. You know, that's the one sticks out the most these 9 years later. I come home from work and immediately ask her what's going on between her and Richard. She lies. I ask again, turning on my computer. She knows I know. She pauses. Just tell me. My mind is screaming inside. She finally says, nothing good. Turns out it was a full-on PA, the worst of which began about 3 days prior to my discovery. My emotions are full-bore out of control at this point, not to return to a state of normalcy for about 2 years. You read that right. I didn't even out for 2 years. Had I known what was in front of me, I would have left in that moment. It was good while it lasted. Thanks for the good times. See you later. Bye. Nope. Instead, I tell her I love her, and I don't want to lose her, but that I will not stand by while she decides who to be with. It's either him or me. Why is this a decision being made after marriage? My mind starts yelling again. Again, she pauses. My mind, what the hell? You're caught cheating by the one who you made promises to remain faithful to, and you pause to think about it. It's funny what you remember, and what matters all this time later. She finally says she chooses our marriage. Neither of us sleep at all that night. Surprise. The next day she says she needs to tell him it's over. Okay, use Facebook, I assume. Nope. Why? That's a silly assumption, Rhett. Without telling me her plans, she goes to his barber shop the next day. He was also living there at the time. The guy who helped ruin my marriage clearly deserves better than a text breaks up. He needs to hear it in person. Sure, he should never have been there in the first place, but he has feelings too. I drive by to give him a friendly handshake and a piece of my mind, and to my surprise I see her car parked in front of him. Yet another lovely memory tattooed upon my brain for those quiet moments when anxiety finds tranquility and drops in to say hi, or maybe it's screw you. I'm not sure. You can guess what happens next. Trickle truth, me blowing up and calling her all sorts of things. I mean, I was downright cruel. She needed to suffer with me, or so I thought in these awful moments. From the first moment of D-Day she would say, it's all my fault. She became very insecure without me around. She wanted nothing more than to repair our marriage. I've never much doubted her devotion to saving our marriage. She has also never blamed me for what happened. She has been very good in the wayward department for how to behave in order to show remorse. I often reflect on the moment we were married. I remember looking in her eyes and seeing the closest thing I've ever seen to an angel. Conversely, I remember standing at the kitchen sink and looking at the dishes the morning after D-Day. She came up to me and I looked in her eyes. I don't remember feeling much beyond numbness. With tears in her eyes she said, please don't look at me like that. I immediately realized my old perception of her was gone. I didn't see the angel I married 10 years before. I saw an imposter who'd come into my marriage and cut off its legs. All the remorse in the world won't heal that. Many people like to use words like scar and mistake when they talk about affairs. These words are wholly unsuited for the task they're given. Words like atomic destruction, disfigurement, permanency, adulteration, choice, and many others are far better for the job. Do you know what it means to adulterate something? It means to make it impure, usually by adding another ingredient. This results in an inferior object that has fewer qualities than what it possessed previously. This is the root for the word adultery. How do you remove this new ingredient in your marriage? There's the rub. You can't. I've heard the saying, you can't unring that bell. And the people who say that are right. Many people also like to hand out wisdoms like, it will never be the same again. Thank you, Catherine Obvious. I find it will not likely be the same in a good way ever again, to be a little more accurate. Nothing made this feeling of tainted affection more apparent than bonding. 2 days after D-Day she suggests we need to sleep together before we lose that connection too. Well, we had slept together, and we did the whole hysterical bonding thing. And I despised it. I hated the feeling of needing bonding with her, but then when we did sleep together, I could only think about her being with him. Mind movies during bonding are not a good thing. Compound that with the strange behavior of almost daily hysterical bonding, and you have a recipe for setting a pattern for some very destructive bonding. I remember standing there in the dark after bonding, hoping she couldn't see the hurt and disgust on my face. Just to keep bonding from happening on our first anniversary post D-Day, I went into the hotel room and I repeatedly X'd myself in the leg until I couldn't walk. The physical pain was obvious when I was looked at. I spent a week and a half on crutches to avoid the torture of bonding. Don't worry, it gets better. Bonding now isn't as painful. I can usually avoid the mess of mind movies, but it's nowhere near the connection we had before. I mentioned I had ex-ideations. I was also very physically self-destructive, in case you haven't noodled that one out yet. I've actually had a loaded revolver in my mouth, with my finger on the trigger, trying to overcome that instinct to live, when I remembered an old boss I had before this happened. His mother had killed herself. He was tortured through school and had a lot of emotional problems from it. I thought of my own kids, and I knew I couldn't do that to them. I still have thoughts of the ending, and often don't really care if I live or end. As long as my family can cash in on the life insurance, then all is well. XI is off the table for now, however. I've also stopped punching things, usually stone or brick, until my hands were covered in blood. I have scars on my knuckles from this, and if I hold up 3 fingers with my left hand, like what the Boy Scouts do, I can't straighten my middle finger anymore. Did I mention that I did most of this destructive behavior whilst we were going to therapy? I've seen a therapist for both my own behavior and my marriage. I've taken drugs for my depression. I know I have had, but I often wonder if I'm bipolar. Funny thing is I wasn't very unstable before this experience. Neither the drugs nor the therapy seemed to help me much long term. My wife also had some very odd behaviors during this time. Things that don't fly in the common occurrences of infidelity. One such instance was she and I were at a stoplight. She was driving. Suddenly she begins to hyperventilate and panic, like she'd just seen a ghost. I try to figure out what's going on, and I look to see Richard in his car driving toward her office. It was only toward where she worked, but it could be he's going anywhere, right? We follow, and he leads us right into her office parking, where he scans her normal parking spots, and then drives on. When confronted about it, he claims he was dropping his cat off at the vet. A stop he never made, as I verified it with my friend's wife, who worked for the vet near there at the time. Why would anyone have such a reaction to an AP though? This wasn't the only time she had such a reaction. I won't go through them all, but why would a woman be afraid of somebody she had an affair with after the affair was exposed? Eventually she comes to me and says it wasn't an affair. It was forced. She says she never wanted it. Real Elizabeth Smart kind of stuff. Now this really messes things up. How self-centered am I to drone on and act like a reckless teenager when she's been through far more than I have? I now have more questions than she has answers, and I feel like I'm going insane. I won't go into detail on what we still talk about to this day, but no, I still have a lot of confusion over this. I believe that something scary happened between my wife and Richard, but either the affair damage has already been done to me or I don't know enough to make an informed decision about what actually happened. Probably both. At this point, I don't know if I'll ever be certain with what actually happened. Today I'm typing this out on my phone, watching the battery drain, and I keep having the thought that if I believed I could replace my wife with somebody just as beautiful, she is a very pretty woman, who loves me back like she tries, and hasn't cheated on me, then I'd be much more comfortable. The problem is that I don't believe I could find that. Grass is greener and all that crap. And if I did, then I'd likely sabotage it with all my emotional baggage. This whole ordeal has me far more screwed up than I was when it started. You might say, Rhett, she loves you. She has stood by and taken your pain as you threw it at her. She has been there when you couldn't work. She was there when you hated her, and she's still there trying to love you. Be grateful for what you have and stop focusing on the one thing she did wrong. You'd be right, except I don't focus on it. It, meaning just knowing what she did, just has to remind me it's there, and any good moment instantly turns sour. We were on vacation at Lake Powell recently, and she was so excited to be there over her birthday. She'd never been there, and she loves to hike and explore. I was feeling content and happy that I'd made something good happen for her, and then here comes good old memory to remind me that things aren't so good. 9 years later. You know, I once heard that any problem that won't last past 5 years isn't too big of a deal. I guess this is a big deal. So many so-called fixes for this involve realizing we're all imperfect and accepting those imperfections, or focusing on the good, or other such platitudes. I knew my wife was imperfect before. She spent all the money on the credit cards and never told me until it was time to pay the balance. My love for her was unfazed. I focused on the good before too. I valued her fidelity and found great value in my marriage through her faithfulness to us. It was us against the world, and we had something more, something better than what I saw most others had. Now I struggle to find value in waking up. What happens when the very things you valued most in something, my marriage in this case, turn and become the very things you dislike it for? I have some final thoughts to share. Some say a marriage can be better after an affair. I don't think any marriage is better off for having had an affair, or the marriage was likely terrible to begin with. Sure, affairs can be wake-up calls, but it's not the only wake-up call available to the desperate. I also acknowledge that there are possibly couples who are happy together post-affair. The unicorn couples. If they exist, then they are the exception, not the rule. I can assure you that I'd be much happier in my marriage having never experienced this. Happy or unhappy, all this doesn't change that affairs cause destruction, and leave more than just the couple involved affected. Wake-up calls can, and should, be far less destructive. Can you repair this affair damage? I'd say you can a little. This even has its limits. So long as memory persists, then the damage will be felt. Sure, you don't have to constantly punish your wayward spouse, and you shouldn't. But I can assure you that you, the BS, will be punished frequently and when you least expect it. Remember that stupid thing you said when you were 13 and it comes to you late at night and keeps you from sleeping? That thing's got nothing on this crap storm. My period of grieving is over. I'm unique in how long I've been in pain. It's my choice to be here. Gee, I never thought of any of that. In that case, problem solved. Thanks, of course, I've thought of these things. Or is anyone here so obtuse to believe that 9 years wallowing? I know. This is willingly. In this mess doesn't cause serious self-reflection. I fully recognize that it's my choice to be here, or leave, or whatever. I know that it's my responsibility to fix me, and nobody else can do it for me. I've tried dreaming of what it would be like without her. I've tried loving and being grateful for what I still have. I've tried every reasonable thing my little brain could think of. The first 5 years of this were done almost to the exclusion of everything else. It was an obsession. It became my new hobby. A hobby I found little reward in and no enjoyment. I'm stubborn, not ignorant. I also know I'm not unique in my current state. The very fact that other years later posts exist tells me this. Add moment. Who defines how long a reasonable grieving period is anyways? Why do we have a need to tell others it's time to get over it and shut up? That's what that means, you know. I've always figured after a major trauma that you have your intense grief, then after that passes you have tiny moments of grief for the rest of your life as things happen that remind you of the traumatic event. Those little moments are important. They're important because they can disrupt what would have otherwise been a good time. It's very much like the proverbial crap sandwich. Sure, it's not the crap sandwich you were first handed. This sandwich has everything you love to have on a sandwich, except for the crap sprinkles. Do you like crap sprinkles? I don't. It makes that really good sandwich absolutely terrible. Those moments never truly go away, which means grieving is a constant process that can take the rest of your life. It is not a hair shirt that we put on and then become little bee about. I'm not still married only because I feel like I can't do better. A few months ago, those same neighbors who lost the child I mentioned, they divorced. They have other children, and those children are friends with my own. My kids watched as another couple split and went their separate ways. One night, during this event, my daughter caught my wife and I talking while we were both standing in the hallway. She walked over to us, grabbed our hands, put them together, and walked away. She was trying to insulate us from what her friend's parents were doing. I know it would destroy her to see my wife and I split right now. So, in addition to reasons stated above you have for the kids, then there's the money. Divorce law in my state is notoriously brutal to men. If we split then that twat OM wins. Pick one. Or pick all. There was a video I watched here a while ago. He said he was going to wait for his children to all reach 18, and the day after youngest's birthday, blindside the WW with divorce. I don't quite recall who it was involved or I'd drop names. I remember thinking he had a decent plan. One thing I want to make clear here is I do not advocate reconciliation. I really never have. I've always known deep down that an affair is the death of a happy relationship. Just because somebody chooses to stay doesn't mean they're magically thinking things will get better. They don't. Even with hard work they don't. History has a powerful effect, even after the intense emotion of trauma has faded. My final thought here is this. I know I wrote something above that is anything but pleasant on my views of marriage and post-affair life. That does not mean I don't find happiness and value elsewhere. My overall opinion of life equals good. My marriage equals not good. I have a good job that challenges me. I have side hustles that are paying me money and engaging me in productive hobbies. I work out. I like to be in the mountains hiking. I love and adore my children, though my heart aches for what they've been through. My point in this exercise is to illustrate how destructive affairs are, not to complain about how everything sucks. My comment, one excuse is as good as another. I'd recommend D, but this guy has a tin ear. She had romanticized him for years. You never had her whole heart. She wasn't over him. She inched closer to her affair with him in small steps. It's easier to rationalize it away that way. Typically, the steps resemble this. Then they say, it just happened. At some point the affair is discovered. Often once an affair is outed, the cheater lies to themselves and their partner with the ferocity of a cornered animal. They balance guilt with blame and become unrecognizable. Sometimes this process is interrupted by the affair partner throwing your partner under the bus to save their own marriage, or by the discovery that he was cheating with multiple partners, and she realizes she was duped. In your case it sounds like her eyes were opened when something scary happened. Perhaps as you read, she tried to get out of his bed one day at some point, and he forced himself on her. But she never wanted it. Unlikely, she was well down the list of rationalizations by that time and was most likely physical cheating already. But here you are, the damage is done. This is your future, and you are making the best of it. What else can you do under the circumstances?